Hey everyone, today we have reached the pinnacle of the book of Isaiah. If you've been following along, Isaiah has been preaching to a crowd of people, his people, the Israelites, who have put God, who was they once proclaimed as king, that they were going to follow him and made a covenant with him. That you're going to be our God, we're going to be your people, and we will stick with this covenant no matter what. Well, in the time of Isaiah, the people have completely abandoned their covenant promises, like a wife who has been unfaithful to her husband, or husband to their wife, however you want to put that. And they've not only forsaken God and worshipped other gods, but their behavior has been radically affected by this. That they've trusted in money or riches or power or selfishness or greed rather than in following the way that God had designed them to live as his image bearers and the kingdom of priests that they were called to be, light to the world. So they had done none of these things. They had abandoned everything, and Israel had become this corrupt place. They split, a civil war happened, and they split into a southern and northern kingdom, and God sent people called the prophets like Isaiah to call them back, to say it's not too late, turn back, otherwise I'm going to allow your sin to catch up with you. But the people don't listen. They don't. And so God's warnings come true. And the people find themselves in exile. And as they're in exile in another land, with their own land wiped out, the temple wiped out, their people wiped out, they begin crying out and saying, now what, God? What do we do? We obviously got this wrong. And through Isaiah, through his message, you see this repeated sort of theme over again, that God knows the people aren't going to listen to the prophet's message. God knows that they're going to continue in their sin and their selfish ways. And so he knows that exile is going to happen. But even weaved through those sections of judgment are these promises. We see it in chapter 7 about God sending through the virgin a son, someone who is going to come, and he was going to be unlike all the other rulers that they had known. He was going to reign with justice. He's going to be God's chosen person. He was going to be the one to establish peace once and for all. And you see, again, these promises sort of sprinkled all over Isaiah until we get to chapter 40, which we've looked at a couple weeks, which is a turning point, that the people are in exile. And God says, even though you didn't listen, even though you abandoned your part of the covenant, I haven't. I am sticking with you, and I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to bring you out of exile, and you're going to return to the land, but there's more. There's more to the story than just sort of being restored between you and I, and being restored to your land and things how they are. But I'm going to do something that is going to be a promise for all people, all time, everywhere. That I'm going to do something, send someone to make everyone right with me again. And not just right in this life, but forever. And so we see these hints dropped about this person that God was going to send. The Hebrew word for this is the word Messiah. In Greek, it's the word Christ. The same word, two different languages. And we get a preview even that God had sent people like this before to do temporary things to help his people. Like King Cyrus was a prototype of a Messiah-type figure that God was going to send. He was going to put his spirit on in order to lead people back to him. But Isaiah continues and says, King Cyrus is just a prototype, but I'm going to send someone who is going to take care of your sin and brokenness once and for all. And by the time we get to Isaiah chapter 53, we see who this person is. He is the suffering servant. the one who is disregarded, shamed, ridiculed, beaten, mocked, scorned, and ultimately killed. And that despite all of these things, that through that suffering and death, somehow this marvelous act happens. That this person, this suffering servant, this Messiah, this chosen one that God has anointed and sent, is not just going to suffer and die and be rejected for his own sake, but he's actually taking on everybody's sin upon himself. Everyone's brokenness, everyone's running away from God, everyone's idolatry, everything that anyone has ever did. This one person is going to come. He's going to obey God's rules fully, and despite the fact that we reject him, beat him, and ultimately kill him, what we don't understand is that through his wounds, we are healed. That by his suffering, he is taking our suffering upon himself. And that though he may die, that is not the end of the story. He will reign victoriously to life again. And because of that, you and I will experience this full healing and wholeness and welcome into God's family again. Well, it doesn't take a lot of guesswork, maybe if you've been part of this church, to understand who this person is. He's not named, at least not here, but we get hints of his name earlier. He's going to be the Emmanuel, God with us. He's going to be called Messiah or Christ, the anointed one that God has sent. He's going to be the one who is the only one who's lived a perfect life, who died for no reason that he did himself, but by his wounds we will be healed. The New Testament writers pick up on this, and they obviously see that that person is Jesus. Jesus is the one on whom all of our punishment, all of our shame, all of our brokenness is put. And that when he is on that cross, he takes our sin upon himself and puts it to death. And that God raises him back to life so that those that believe in him will have his everlasting life. This is what Isaiah 54 talks about. It's an invitation for those of us to put our faith in what God has done, the person that God has sent. So, have you put your faith in Jesus today? Have you realized that all of your sin and brokenness has been taken away by the loving sacrifice of this one person, Jesus? Do you let that truth wash over you and compel you to choose him and live for him? Or do you still continue, like the Israelites, to choose other things to be God over your life? These are the questions that we wrestle with. I implore you to read through this section again and again. Let it sink down deep into you, just so you know exactly what cost Jesus paid on your and my behalf. That's it. We'll see you later. Bye.